So good morning. I'll introduce myself because I haven't. So my name is Leah Walker, and I am of Danish, English, and the Katma ancestry, and my family ties are mostly on Seabird Island. And I have been working as the Associate Director for the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health for a couple of years. But previous to that, Associate Director of Education, and working at UBC to increase the knowledge of healthcare professionals, working with our people and communities, as well as supporting initiatives for our youth around community. So summer science and other courses that support our wellness and well-being. And I'm thrilled to have you here. And Learning Circle has been around for about 8 years now. And it started as just a video conference initiative, and it's expanded to include webinar. And Adams Lake, we're really happy to see you here. I think this is really exciting, and so if you have a chance to introduce yourself later, that would be really lovely. Really nice to see you there. And she's, and I imagine that there are other people in the health center, and hopefully Halitan will join us. And thank you for all of you participants out there. That's really fantastic on webinar. So I think I'll ask Brandon to introduce himself, and Keith, and then we'll kind of go into what we're going to talk about today. And I'm hoping that all of you will have some questions, and I'm really excited to hear about some of your stories.
Sure. Again, I'd like to say thank you for having me here today. My name is Brandon Gabriel. My ancestral name is Kolakwistin. I'm from the Kwantlen Nation, which is in Fort Langley, British Columbia. My name was given to me by elders from the Musqueam, Katzie, and Kwantlen Nations. The name Kolakwistin was a chieftain of one of our shared communities, which is it's called Kakate, and it's present day in North Surrey, kind of it's on the Fraser River, where you're in and around the area of the New Westminster Quay. So that's where our ancient village is from. So the name was given to me because my ancestor who carried that name was a speaker. So so it just means my name is about bringing people together. So I was bestowed with that name. So I'm a graduate of Kwantlen Polytechnic University. I studied cultural anthropology there, and then from there I went on to get my bachelor's degree at Emily Carr University in fine art. I don't know what else to say other than I'm an avid canoeist. I've been canoeing since I was 21 years old. I'm 37 now, and I have many stories to tell about that. So I think that's good for now. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Brendan. Welcome. Keith.
My name is Keith Point. I was born and raised in Chilliwack on the Schuylkill First Nations My traditional name is Sial with it. That name was given to me by my grandfather, who is originally from Musqueam. He grew up in Port Coquitlam and moved to Chilliwack to raise his family.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're going to talk, I'm wondering about what the flow is going to be, because you just come landing in, which is absolutely beautiful, but we'll free flow as well. And I know that you have a PowerPoint, and
Yes.
so we could get into that. But the big questions are, I think, Brandon, you work with canoe journeys and long distance voyages, so
Yes.
I'd really like to hear about that and how you got into canoeing and his story of canoeing with First Peoples and what it's teaching you and the importance of that. And I was talking with Keith earlier, and I'm looking forward to him sharing with you out there about the importance of war canoes and the way of life that you are part of, and what you continue to create with your family and community in Skokie, which is really fantastic. And I can see how it would be a benefit for all of us, for all of us in our communities, is to reconnect with some of those traditional teachings and ways of being. It's really amazing.
Okay.
So I guess I'm not sure how you want to go, but I wondered if if I were to ask, how did you get into canoeing?
Okay.
If you want to remember, that's where I'm going to hear your stories, that you started at 21. So
Yes.
how did you get into canoeing, Brandon?
Well, it was kind of by accident, actually. There was a canoe journey that had just began in the province of BC, and it's called the Pulling Together Canoe Journey. And my community was one of the host nations when the journey was coming from Harrison Lake down the Fraser River and making its way to the mouth of the Fraser in Musqueam and over to Ambleside Park. It was a 10-day journey, and my brother and my dad were actually participants in it. And I was actually not. I did not anticipate that I was going to be part of this journey. And it was just a small flotilla. There was only about 5 canoes, so maybe there was about 50 participants. And they came to our community, and it was a mix of young youth, Aboriginal youth, as well as elders from our communities, various people from law enforcement and our school districts. And when they arrived at our shores, they were so weather worn, and really just you could see that the length of the journey from Harrison Lake had an impact on them, like not only physically but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The words that were coming out of these young people's mouths were like, every one of them talked about this life change that was taking place, and it was happening on this short span of time, on this really, this stretch of waterway. And so I was really moved by that. I just thought that was, I'm like, maybe I'll try it. I'll just, they had an extra spot on one of the canoes, so I said, yes, I'll go. I'll just go for like an hour, because the next village, the next village downriver from us is our neighbors in the Katzie Nation, and the paddle from Kwantlen to Katzie is only maybe an hour, if that. So
really? Okay.
It's a really short distance.
Yeah.
So I paddled from Kwantlen to Katzie, and I was hooked. That was it. I knew that it was going to be. I was like, I have to finish this. I have to go on this. I have to keep going on this journey. And the fact that I was with my dad and my brother too was just a whole other, added a whole other dimension to it. It was like this. There was this bonding that we forged with each other that I never had before with them. And you're challenging yourself in a very holistic way, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And we were traveling on our ancient waterway too, so the impact it has on all parts of self is very profound, and I really feel that like it's in our DNA. Everybody comes from a canoe culture at some point in their lineage.
That's true.
And so I think that is something that all people are able to connect to, and I think that it definitely had a life changing path for me, and it's something that I still hold near and dear to my heart. And I've been able to travel on most of the major waterways in British Columbia. And in 2014, I was part of the Spirit of the Coast Canoe Journey, which was to raise awareness for pipeline issues in northern British Columbia. So we traveled from the Fraser River, from Fort Langley, from our home village in Kwantlen, 1,200 kilometers up the coast of BC on the ocean
That's
to
amazing.
Prince Rupert. And
That's amazing.
it took 2.5 months, and to say that experience wasn't life-changing would be an understatement. It was an odyssey, and it was one of the most. I can't when people were asking me, "How was your trip?" I was just like, it wasn't a trip. It was something to behold. It was something that I will compare every other thing in my life to that event.
Wow.
And I just tell people, like, the only way you will understand what I seen or what I experienced is if you do for yourself, because it will be different for everybody, because you are challenging yourself, and you are the one who is going to undergo those changes, and you get what you put into it, and I put a lot into it. So
That's fantastic.
that's been part of my journey.
I
So,
want to hear about
yes.
that too, and and I also, if you could harken back to 21, even though you don't look that old, personally to say, but if you can harken back to 21 years old,
Yeah.
what were you doing at 21, and what did this ignite in you that you did not have before?
Well, I think I'm one of those people who likes to put things into context. So my journey's been. I feel like in this lifetime I've lived 7 or 8 lives. That's how my journey's been. And so talking a little bit about growing up on the Kwantlen Reserve in Fort Langley. So my grandfather was Grand Chief Joe Gabriel, and before him was my great grandfather Alfred Gabriel, and so that's on my mother's side. And further back on my mother's side, I'm also related to the Sapass family. Chief William Sapass is my great-great-grandfather, so I have a connection to the Skokel people as well. And so I come from a lineage of leaders, of people who are respected for their leadership. But that isn't to say that within our community that we weren't affected by the genocidal impacts of colonialism. We were a nation that was 10,000 strong at one time. The smallpox epidemic in 1863 diminished our population in our community to under 100 people. I think by the census in 1902, we were numbered at 62.
Oh my gosh, like many of our
Yeah.
missions, actually. I was
Yeah.
talking to people in Tsleil-Waututh, and the same thing happened. I mean,
Yeah.
many of our communities it happened.
Yes.
It was absolutely devastating. Yeah.
So, in addition to having this diminished population, you also have this colonial superpower that usurped the land, they usurped the power of our Indigenous people, and our nation was really impoverished for a long time. So, prior to me coming into the world, I'm told that there was a lot of economic strife. There was lots of abject racism and abject poverty. And I think growing up, I saw a lot of that, like the overlap from that era into my childhood. So there, our community was faced with and still has its challenges with, you know, alcoholism and drug addiction. You know, there's pockets of poverty. And even this power struggle with the governments of Canada and the province and municipalities and then you have, you know, education systems, you have religion, the list goes on and on of all these things that our community has to contend with. So that being said, my experience was quite traumatic. There were predators in our community, people who were sexual deviants, and I was a victim of that kind of abuse, and it wasn't something that I addressed until, you know, I didn't address it until I was an adult. So until I was in my late teens, early 20s, it was something that I never talked about. So growing up, I always felt like I was different, or I just felt like this odd, like a black sheep in the crowd. And it's because of those experiences. They were, not only were those types of things happening in our community that were under the radar and unbeknownst to the people who were acting as our protectors, because that's what predators do. They sneak under the radar and they infiltrate. And so not only was it happening underhandedly by people in the community, but it was happening this overhanded. There was this government abuse that was taking place too, that was intent on taking away power from our family. So, as a youth, I became addicted to drugs and alcohol. I was, by the time I was 14, I had experimented with just what every drug there was. By the time I was 16, I was an alcoholic. And by the time I was 18, I was out on the street. I would venture to the downtown east side, and I would spend a lot of my time there. And you know, like that brought its own set of problems. It was about me numbing my pain from my youth. It was also creating new traumas and new experiences with it. And my world, it was always, and in addition to that, I had one of the things that I used, one of the tools that I honed was my artistic endeavor. It became this affinity that I had. I loved drawing, I loved painting, and it was an escape, but it was also something that helped build my self-esteem. And so, on one hand, I was experiencing a lot of strife. On the other hand, I was getting a lot out of this artistic thing that I was doing, this journey. And so my life up till that point was just absolutely horrendous. It was like a hurricane. And by the time I was on my first journey, it answered a lot of hurt, and it answered a lot of pain for me. And it was the catalyst for me to help heal myself. And so I, like our communities, it's just one of those things that I know works for us. And it touches on all these things that we need. I need to fill my heart with love. I need to fill my mind with things to look forward to. I need to nourish my body, and I need to keep my mind clear. And I get all those things on these canoe journeys. And all I tell people is you have to do it for yourself. It's something that you will not regret. And so that's explaining sort of this broad
big picture
of what that was like for me, and that's yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's amazing. And you never know what's going to save your life, right?
Exactly.
And that's a lot of wisdom right there too, all wrapped up in that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that it's a very strong story, and many of our people have stories like this, of course. And for so long, they weren't listened to or believed,
Mhm.
or, as you have said, not talked about, because we had no avenues to know where to talk about those kinds of things.
Mhm.
As a society, culturally, it wasn't something that was ever talked about anyway.
Mhm.
So there's ownership to be had there too. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to skip over now to Keith, not to, because we're going to go into it. But Keith, how did you get into canoeing? And the wonderful thing about what Keith is telling me is that this has been a way of life in your family for a really long time.
From my earliest memories, I grew up around canoes. I don't know anything but. I don't know any other life but paddling. Ever since I was a little boy, that's all we've ever done, is canoe paddled, built canoes, and traveled to canoe races.
Can you tell, for most of us that have never had that experience, to actually understand what you mean by that way of life? And you were describing that for me before. So when you were a young boy, what was your family doing around the canoe that you participated in?
Coming from that kind of an environment, it's a normal way of life, and I didn't know anything else about it. And there was one year I didn't really understand or appreciate what it meant to me. And one year we took a year off from paddling, out of respect for one of our elders' requests. So then I knew what it was like to not do that. And I took a lot of that for granted, being around the people, traveling to other villages and seeing a lot of our friends and families that travel that same circuit. So to me, it was all about the people. I remember being around as a little boy, I remember being around all of my aunties and uncles and running around the canoe races and the camping and the ferries with all of my cousins and all the other kids.
Yeah. So you were telling me that you do it all year round. So Keith, not only their family, they start canoeing training fairly early on, but everything in your life is dedicated for when you actually start the training, and you're building canoes as well.
We
So it's a whole way of life that most of us don't even understand. It's not like a Tuesday night paddle, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad is a canoe builder, and he's the one that trained me. And that's what we do in the off season, is we're building canoes and we're preparing financially for the coming canoe season, which starts in mid-March, and all of our focus goes into the paddling, so we don't have much time to do anything else like fundraising or preparing and maintaining our canoes. We do all of that in the off season.
Okay.
We have a large amount of canoes.
How many do you have?
Probably within our family, over 20.
Wow. And these are all dugout canoes, aren't they?
The majority of them are dugouts. We have a few modern strip-built canoes
Yeah.
and a couple of fiberglass canoes.
Wow. And about 10 people fit in a canoe?
The big they're 11 mans.
11 mans?
52 feet.
Wow. Wow.
They come from an old growth cedar. The last 11 man that we built, we counted the rings on it. It was over 400 years old.
Oh my gosh. So you're actually you're in history, really. That's pretty profound too, to actually have that appreciation for a vessel that is that old, that gave itself up to be your carrier. Like, you have to treat something like that with respect, don't you?
We do. Each canoe that we build has its own story. We can, most of the time, we can track where the log itself came from and the building process of the canoe and who was there. And there's a story that goes with
There's a
each
story
canoe.
with each canoe as
There
well.
is, yeah.
That's amazing. So your father canoed, your mother canoes, your sister's canoe, like everyone canoes in your family.
Everybody canoes. When I was young...
What if I just didn't want to? What if I'm just like, You were made to?
When I was young, it was not an option.
Okay.
My aunties and my uncles, and especially my dad, they were very persuasive. We weren't given a choice. Like I said earlier, our only excuses for not paddling were pregnancy and school.
Okay.
If we were going to school, yeah, okay, or if you were pregnant, sure.
Yeah.
But other than that, there was no excuse.
No excuse. So if you're training, can you tell me what training looks like?
Training is 7 days a week, starts in early March. We begin with an easy...
7 days a week?
7 days a week, there's no days off.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's amazing.
We start off with a light schedule, 15, 20 minutes a day.
Okay.
We're more scientific about it today. You know, we do all the online research, and
Okay.
a lot of us have some experience with personal trainers, and so we're pretty technical about it today. But back in the day, we would just show up the lake and get on a canoe and paddle around. And
Wow. So that you canoe, you were telling me earlier that you canoe, Cultus Lake mostly is where you do your training?
that's where all of our training is, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you bring your canoes there and you go. And how many people are canoeing right now?
On my team right now, we have about 30 participants,
Okay.
12 or 14 women, the same number of men, and a small handful of young children.
Nice, nice. And what's exciting about this, okay, this is very competitive canoeing, so it's a different kind of canoeing. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, the competitiveness part of it is really exciting. It's just like any sport. There's rivalries, a lot of historical rivalries. All of my paddlers can sit here and tell you different stories and experiences and memories of different races with different teams from other villages.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of stories.
And how long are the races normally?
A normal 11-man race is around 20-25 minutes.
Okay.
Usually
And
around
you're
8 kilometers.
going hard.
We're going hard, yeah.
Oh, I can just imagine the burn. I can just imagine the burn. Yeah, okay. So you're going hard, and who's your fiercest competitors?
We have some good rivalries with a lot of the teams. Saanich is one of the good teams. Nooksack right now is really competitive.
Nooksack, is that Washington Way?
Yeah, just south of the border.
Alright.
Nanaimo is really good.
Yeah.
But over the years, a lot of the teams have some really good success stories. Cowichan has always been historically strong. Lummi has been good. North Vans and the Musqueams have been really strong.
Oh, really, eh?
So it seems like
Okay.
everybody's had their turn at being successful and
Yeah.
competitive.
Yeah.
Chehalis is another one. They have a lot of history of being very fierce.
Yeah, nice. Okay, I'm going to ask you what your training regimen soon. So let us ask the next question. I can just feel it. So I just started sun run training again, so I'm feeling a little sore. You know, that's 3 days a week and a little bit of stretching in between. So I can just imagine, you know, after a winter of not training, like anyway, okay, I'm going to ask you about that. All right. So Brandon, you alluded to your context, but you also talked a little bit about our history with canoeing, First Nations history, and it does belong to lots of people and lands. We all have some roots, that's how we got around.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more recently with our coastal nations and with the peoples of Canada, I feel like it's even closer than the distant history of some of the European countries or others. Although I was in the Pacific, some of the Pacific Islanders and others are very close to canoeing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Still, and when I was in Hawaii once, Hawaii canoeing is really important there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you were talking a little bit about history and
Mhm.
Kwantlen's history too, which feels like it's important too. There was a milestone recently around that.
Yes, actually there was. So I mean, I think, speaking within the context of my own community, Fort Langley, as you know, is the first colonial capital of British Columbia. It's where the document that was signed in November of 1858 that basically attempted to thwart Aboriginal rights and title on the land. And that document was signed in our territory. And if you ever visit the Fort Langley National Historic Site, which is kind of like a modern day museum / reenactment of, there's actors who are dressed in period costumes, and they reenact various events throughout history. And it's it's a really big educational platform for within our education system. So the colonial mythical telling of this story is really, in my mind, in my opinion, is really watered down.
Of course.
Because if you ever walked into the big house inside the palisade of the Fort Historic Site, the big house is this big central architectural structure where this document was signed. And if you walk inside to the room where the document was signed, they have a painting that's dedicated to this event. And I wish I brought a slide of it because I would show it. But so you walk in, and there's a picture of Sir James Douglas. There's military people. There's other people dressed in suits, and there's a Coast Salish man inserted into this image of this great signing ceremony. But if you know anything about history, our people weren't allowed to be present at that event. So the presentation of it and its reimagining to the young people in this province is ahistorical. It's not factual in how the treatment of our people were at that time. Living in this community, because we can actually see the Fort Historic Site from our settlement, there's this policy, this architectural policy, a bylaw in the Township of Langley that says every building must adhere to Victorian style or frontier style architecture design. So, as a policy, as a contemporary policy, the vision and telling of the history is only told and molded from this monocultural perspective. Not even, it doesn't acknowledge in any meaningful way or any collaborative way the effort and the sacrifice and the injustice that was wrought upon the Indigenous people in in what will become the province of British Columbia. So in my mind, our people sort of were one of the first communities to be really experience this onslaught of persistent, focused, determined annihilation of our culture. And then undergoing, as I mentioned, how we had a loss of, a dwindling population as well, and no economic power whatsoever in this new colonial construct. With it, and then you have residential schools, and that took place for
60 scoop.
the residential schools were in place for 112 of the last 148 years. So for almost as long as we've been a country, right? So the canoe culture also underwent major duress in our community. It was completely annihilated in our community, like completely. All modes of cultural production in our community was dead completely. So the colonial process was successful in its attempt at doing away with our culture. And it wasn't until recently that we've, I'm going to say in the last 20 years, our drive and our ambition to reclaim what has always been ours has really materialized into something something that I'm really proud of. And so, you know, like we named our first canoe back in 2012, which was over, you know, we did some history, and the last canoe that was made in our community was in 1900. So this was, you know, about 112 years in the making.
Wow.
And so it took that long. And
Oh my goodness.
so, you know, like, and we just rebuilt our longhouse, and we didn't have our longhouse was burnt down by the government, the colonial government in the late 1800s. So it was even longer that we didn't have our longhouse. You know, the process has been slow, but it's been purposeful, and it's been really meaningful for us. And I'm glad to be part of that reawakening, because it's so important. I want my kids to know their culture. I want them, like as Keith was saying, that he didn't have a choice to be out on the water, that it was something that his forebears made him do. That's what I want to teach my kids. I'm going to say, you know what, you're going to come canoeing. And that's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we come from a great canoe culture, and it's something to be proud of. Really
Absolutely,
proud of.
absolutely. That's so exciting. So, for Quantum, because I didn't know that, and to know that, to have that memory of how long it has been. So it must have been incredibly profound to put that boat in the water.
It was very moving. It was very emotional, like, for a lot of people who were witnessing that event.
Yeah.
Yes.
And who took part in the building of the canoe? Did it become
It was
a
actually
really big
it was actually part
event?
of it was actually part of gifting. It was part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, one of their
Legacy
it
project?
was one of their legacy projects. So it was a gift from the outcome of their proceedings.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the, it was just amazing that, you know, we were blessed with such a gift. I mean, it's not, like he says, there's usually fundraising involved with it, and we were gifted with it, and we're just so grateful for that, because had there not been this gifting of this beautiful, you know, canoe, I think we'd still be looking for something, and
Wow.
you know, because it just, that's how it is, you know.
Wow.
You know, so.
So you're learning how to build canoes now, then?
Yeah, actually, we've had offers to from the Lummi Nation to have a cross-border youth, like a youth exchange,
Yeah.
where they are teaching us to do the canoe making, and we are teaching them our common songs, our common tongue, which I just think is great. I just think
That's amazing.
that those things are just.
And do they still speak Hakmuyam too, or?
Well, it's something. There's only about 2 or 3 fluent speakers in our community.
Yeah.
So
Tsleil-Waututh doesn't have any in their dialect.
Yeah,
I was talking
it's
to them, and yeah.
it's that's just another sad impact of colonialism.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that around your canoes? You've had canoes for a long time, or to anything that he was talking about, history with canoeing. So as long as you can remember, your family has been involved in community and canoeing?
My dad and his brothers and the other men that come from that generation, they're self-taught canoe builders. They were paddling. Their history is that they were paddling with one of the teams in the other teams in Chilliwack when they were young men, and as part of the growth process, they decided one day to build their own team, and they had to get a canoe. They tried to buy a canoe, and the other canoe builders told them to, and they were family from Musqueam and from Burrard. They told them, you guys should build your own canoes. And so that was the process of them. They're self-taught. My dad was self-taught, and we developed and designed a process of building canoes.
So maybe you should talk to Keith about building canoes.
Sure, absolutely.
To build canoes,
Yep.
because you've got so many canoes now too, right? So you got it down.
We hope so, yeah. We're always ongoing learning process.
Yeah, that's so neat. By the way, those of you that are on the webinar or Adams Lake, please feel free if you want to ask any questions of Brandon or Keith at any time. Just turn on your mic and interrupt. So I just had a couple of comments. People wanted to thank you for your story and speaking from your heart about with courage.
Thank you.
Yeah, and how the water heals. Okay, so we took you to a dark time in your life, and I'm wondering, so you spoke to this, but if you wanted to add any more, what has canoeing taught you physically, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually? And maybe before we go into that, please, I know that most people know what the canoe journeys are, but some people don't. So maybe you can describe what it is and the route that it has. Oh, got booted. Sorry about that, everyone. So talk to us a little bit about, so Keith's canoeing is competitive and it's racing, and they're 20-minute races or 25-minute races, but for a season, and so then we'll get you to tell us about that. But what about canoe journeys
Distance paddling?
and distance paddling? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think the two biggest differences is one is your mindset. The shorter distance like heats, like the racing heats.
Yeah.
You're putting your all into it, and it's a really intense. You're just like
I can feel the pain of it just telling me about that.
And it definitely requires you definitely have to have your timing right. There's all these just this focus and this energy and a physicality, and it's just a different set of parameters around it. And the distance paddling is it's more about an endurance and stamina, where if you're doing a 25-minute heat for a distance paddle, you're doing the longest paddle I've ever done was 14 hours. And that was like maybe one or two breaks, and it was hard.
Wow.
And that was going from Birch Bay down to Lummi Bay in 2007. That was the longest one I've done. And the average time that you're spending on the water is anywhere between 6 to 8 hours. You have breaks, you have rotations. But you still are required to be physically fit. You have to be mentally prepared for what happens. I think teamwork is always key. I think one of the things that I learned about these big distance paddles when you're out on the open waters is that if you're not working together, you die. It's like okay, either we work together or not at all. Like there's gonna be like that, and that's kind of like it's a really good motivator.
Yeah.
It's a good motivator to overcome your personal adversities, your personal, whatever you got going that's on the land, that's at home or something. There's a willingness for you to overcome that in that moment, because you got to do something that's really challenging, that's going to really take. It's going to give you lots of energy, but it's also going to take a lot of energy too. I feel that the feeling of accomplishment, and it doesn't matter if you're doing a 25-minute heat or a 5-minute heat or a 2-minute heat or an 8-hour day of paddling, the feeling of accomplishment you get afterwards is nothing like, there's no other thing that you can compare it to, because I can have a really bad day here on the land. Like it took me 2 hours to get here in traffic.
Yeah.
And that was horrendous. That was but it's a different mindset. It's a different set of circumstances that are that are getting you from A to B. But I could be having the worst day on the land, and I will always compare it to my worst day at the sea. I'm like, well, remember that time, we almost drowned, like, or when our canoe flipped and we had to like bail it out, and we had to like all clamber back onto the canoe, like, so there was all these, there's all these all these different things that I can look back to on these journeys, and I can come back to, and when I'm here, in this world, in this realm, and just know that I can do it. Like for me, it just challenges me to like how I handle my life and how I handle the world around me. And I think that, speaking of that dark time too with my addictions, because that became a lifelong challenge for me, and it wasn't until the last 5 or 6 years that it's not a part of my life anymore, and it's because I challenged myself in that way. So that's all I can say to that.
Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful. So you answered that in a really, again, thank you for your profound level. So can you describe the canoe journeys for people? So where do they go? Do they go to the same route every year?
It differs. So like I've done the.
Who organizes them?
So I've done the tribal journey too as well.
Yeah.
The tribal journey is different than the pulling together journey.
Okay, so I thought
they
they were similar.
No,
Okay.
they are, but they're different in how
Okay.
they're organized and who organizes them. So
Okay.
the pulling together canoe journey is comprised of law enforcement, school districts, a lot of non-native entities are part of those journeys.
Yeah.
They're shorter in length and shorter in distance. So those last for about 10 days. So 3 days you're training on whoever's the host nation.
Right.
So it's a different
Host nation.
different host nation
Okay.
every year. The logistical components are all the same. It's the same key people that are mapping out the distance. They're mapping, like, they go out on the water with the naval forces and
Right.
and they plot
They
mark the course. There's a lot of safety protocols involved with it. There's just like the handling the food, like how do you feed all these people? How do you make sure that there's enough washroom facilities? There's just all these things that go into the planning of that. And then there's the tribal journey, which is, in my mind, it's a much larger. It covers a lot of space. I mean, the 2007 paddle to Lummi, when I was on that journey, there were 122 canoes.
Wow.
And the
And
furthest,
usually there's 10 or 11 people on those canoes.
at least, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and usually the duration of the paddle is about, I think it's 32 days when the canoes first set out. So I think that year the furthest that canoes came was from the Aleutian Islands in the Panhandle of Alaska, and they came as far south, further north from Oregon. So,
Wow.
and then all converging, and as they go to each community, they're celebrating and
That's right.
they're potlatching.
Yeah.
The Indigenous component is really strong. There's no real influence coming from, there's no funding or anything like that that's coming out of, the law enforcement or any other institutions. It's really grassroots and community driven.
Yeah.
And it's a real, like, anybody who takes on that challenge is, is a hero in my mind. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of bravery to apply those waters the way some of these communities do it. And I just, every time I take part in that journey, or any one of them, but that one in particular, just because of the sheer distance that these people come and they travel and they all get together, is just it's something to behold.
Is it every year?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's
So they both are, yeah. And
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you participated in that? You said you participated in one, Keith.
I've done a few canoe journeys and the tribal journey.
And the tribal journeys too. Yeah. So, and they choose a different route every year. I've heard about that one. So
it's amazing.
it's amazing too. I've heard that, and
Yeah.
I've yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, what do I want to ask you? Any breaks here or any questions from anyway? So, here's the two big questions then. How can canoeing be used to heal and strengthen our communities? And how can youth leadership be woven into canoeing? So both, can you answer those?
I can touch on some of that.
I'd love to hear about that.
We utilize a lot of the experiences on the canoes and on the beaches to help us to get through some of our tougher times. For example, when we're canoe racing and when everybody's paddling together, we can go through some rough water. We might take a little bit of water, but if we're well conditioned, we're pulling together and everybody's doing their job, we can manage the difficult situations quite well. But as soon as somebody gives up or is not doing their job, well, more water will come into the canoe, and then we'll flounder, or it'll just create more problems. Or somebody else gets tired, and we slow down even more, and then the situation becomes dangerous. Well, something very similar happens in life in general when we run into tough situations. As long as everybody's contributing, everybody's participating, and everybody steps up, then we can always get through the tough situations. My elders always look for teachable, they call them teachable moments. And the young people are real careful about exposing their teachable moments. Because they don't want to sit there and be talked to. They're like, oh no, now we have to sit down and listen to this. So the small things, the young people will deal with themselves. But when the bigger things get, they can't manage them, and then our elders get a hold of those and see them, and then it's time to sit down and deal with the situation. And the elders bring everybody together, and we all work on our problems together. Because just like on the canoe, we can't do, it's much tougher to deal with these situations by ourselves, and we bring them together, and we use a lot of constant support. We train every day. We prepare for it all year round, and so just like in life, when we're dealing with our problems, we do it every day, and we stay on top of it. So we use the teachable moments that happen on the canoe. Well, we turn around and use those on the beach. Anything that goes on the beach, we use them on the canoe.
Right.
Everything is self-supportive of each other, reinforcement. With the colonialism, I like talking about that a little bit. The culture and the paddling, like I said earlier, it's a tool, and we use that as a hook to lure the people into participating, and then we can talk to them. With colonialism, I like using the introduction of steel, tool steel. With the introduction of tool steel, we lost a whole sect of our people, the tool makers. They use traditional tools like stone, jade. Well, they no longer had jobs.
Right.
That whole family in every village no longer had a job. Wow. What did they do? And that's one example of what colonialism did to us. And so we're missing cogs on the wheel, and now, being a practical people, it's a natural thing for us to fill in those cogs. We're just learning how to exist in this world. We still have to go to Safeway and buy groceries.
Yeah.
We still have to pay our hydro bills so we have lights in our homes. So we still have to live and exist, and we're learning how to do that, just as we did before colonialism. And so we do the best that we can, and we make do with what we have. And especially in my family, we say we don't ever put our paddle down, because once we put our paddle down, more water comes in the canoe, and it creates more problems for us.
Wow, that's a beautiful metaphor. That's a beautiful metaphor. So you have experience or stories where paddling has supported the well-being of youth in your community?
Yeah, a lot of times. My own background is as a trauma counselor for Stall Nation. I did 10 years of that, and I used a lot of traditional teachings in my work, working with youth that come from traumatic backgrounds. And a lot of times it can be overwhelming, and I found strength in bringing people together with similar backgrounds, similar knowledge, similar experiences, and supporting each other and working together. There's no easy solution.
That's true, right?
I found the best way is coming together, and actually I believe I learned more with the canoe journeys and paddling together than I did with the racing circuit. The canoe journeys actually opened my eyes to the teachings that were right in front of me. They were there, I wasn't paying attention.
Oh my goodness. Oh, even though you might have been using them all the time.
They were, yeah, I took a lot of that for granted. But it took a different environment for me to recognize them for the value that they were and that they held for the people.
Yeah, they're our lifeline, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any stories around that, Brandon?
Yeah, that's just totally.
Kind of got you.
Yes, it did actually. Like I'm just thinking, like that idea about teachable moments and this like if one person gets tired, it affects the whole unit. And so your best day is going to be dependent on the person who's having the hardest day, I think. And then it's up to everybody else to rally behind that person and make sure that they're taken care of, that they got everything they need, whether that's emotional support, like encouragement to like fight, or like giving, making sure that they're mentally strong. And I find that at the end of the day, everybody needs a little bit of something from all of those, all those parts. And
because you're vulnerable.
Absolutely, right? Well, think about it. Like when you're out on the water, and when to see, like if you're out on the ocean, or if you're out on the lake, or out on the river, to see it from land is a whole different perspective. When you're out on the water, you're actually feeling the water run underneath you. You're always at the mercy of the currents and the tides and the wind, the rain, you name it. There's all these factors that come into it. And it affects people psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, in all different ways. So, I like having, we have circles before we go out onto the canoe. We all gather around the canoe and we go around and ask how everybody's doing. Like, how are you this morning? And then somebody might come and they say, I have something that's really hurting. And it's something that comes from hurt that I experienced a long time ago, and it's coming up for me today. And I need help through this. So everybody in the circle is helping that person through it. And to me, that's done more for our young people, even our elders, and me as an adult. It's done more for me because my pain and my trauma is being witnessed by somebody who loves me, or somebody who hated me before they were on the canoe, but now they love me, or you know what I mean, But it's non-institutional. It's not colonial. It's coming from the healing is coming from people's hearts, and it's coming from the land. It's coming from the water. You're in the elements. You're in the closest place to the power of our Creator. You're right in it, right? It's just so powerful to be there. So when our people are out on the water and they're doing that work, and it just creates a whole other sense of unity and family. And when Keith was speaking about colonialism and how this idea that the tools that were introduced took away the roles of our people. Well, a lot of that happened to both our men and our women. In our Stolo communities, because we're matriarchal, our women were the really powerful ones. The name that I carry comes from my mother's side. And colonialism was intent on doing away with all of that. I mean, you look at the old marriage records in the late 1800s, it said, John MacDonald married Indian squaw or something, really derogatory, really unnaming our women's names.
Totally.
So you have women who are coming into the canoes and who are empowering themselves, and they're saying, screw this. we are a powerful people, and then you have the men who, at one point our communities were unemployment was 100% in my community at one time. So the men were no longer breadwinners, and so the roles of men was also skewed and taken, torn apart. And when we're in our canoes, I see it. I just see the light go back into people's faces, because they know that they can take on what's coming, and they know that we can do it as a family and as a community. And when all the canoes are paddling together, it's just the most amazing. It's just like, okay, our nations are still here, and this is where our strength is going to come from. It's how we build our nations, and so like, it's emotional for me to talk about it, because it's just I don't know what words I can add to that, but that's my experience, and this, you can't deny the impact of colonialism on our communities.
No, of course not.
And
no.
like people are like, well, what are you doing in that fiberglass canoe? How come it's not made of wood? It's just like, well, it's made out of fiberglass because you guys clear cut all our trees, and now I'm in this like. No, it's just like, you don't, like, did you not think about that maybe it's just not possible anymore in our community, because the land we live on was completely stripped of its value, and the thing that we were given back out of that was just the scraps. And so here we are, we're using different tools, but I'm not going to let technology be the thing that determines who I am, or what my culture represents, because it's not about this material world that we are completely inundated with, and it has this really powerful psychological impact on all of us too, because it tells us that it's purposefully, the landscape is purposefully laid out in a way so that the vision of our communities is not being told, right? So I look at it like, this colonial remapping, and I got that from, it was a professor emeritus in human geography, Cole Harris, wrote a book called Making Native Space, and he talks about colonial remapping and how its intent is to build layer upon layer of this new idea. So the world that we see around us is this new idea. And every time we take to a canoe, or every time we are having a circle, or every time we are doing our protocol and asserting our authority on the land, we are chipping away at that remapping that took place, and we're reestablishing this power that has always been here. And it's our power, and it's nobody else's. And that to me just adds another layer of this great thing that we're doing.
It's not only personal survival, it's our community survival.
Absolutely.
And it becomes, the personal is the political.
Very
Absolutely,
right?
in a very profound way.
That thing that people say, change comes from within, right?
It
starts like right here.
It's very profound.
Totally,
isn't
and
it?
then
Yeah.
but it becomes this even more powerful feeling, or this force, when it's many people changing from within and moving outward. And I always think that that's where we need to focus our energy. I think that we can talk to government officials and government agencies until our faces go blue about what they're not doing for us or what they've done to us, but really, like, we have all the medicine that we need to take care of ourselves, and we've proven it. And I see it every time we go to the water. I just know it.
It's just up to us to recognize it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And reach out.
Absolutely.
To those that know about the medicine, because so I just think about some of my relatives don't have access to it, or don't recognize it, right? The teachings, they don't recognize the teaching or the medicine right in front of them, even though it's right there.
Exactly. Right? And just to, like, the one last thing too is like, I've done dragon boat racing, and it was fun and everything, but there was nothing spiritual about it. And I found that it was really just this. I thought I was just surrounded by a bunch of obnoxious people, and there was no grounding in, like, no cultural aspect to it at all, and I found it to be really empty and really, like, I didn't get a lot of it because it wasn't something that I was, like, it just didn't, it wasn't for me, you know, it just wasn't.
It wasn't.
And then it was just like, okay, this is not our, that was not our medicine, it's somebody else's medicine, it's not ours. So I know that the spirit of the land is also really speaking through these canoes, and I think the canoes are our greatest teachers in my mind, I think.
The words of our elders are really important, and as a young person, I really chaffed at sitting there and being spoken to. And it wasn't until I went on the canoe journey and I started having an appreciation and even acknowledged that the words had any sort of value. And I run into the same barriers with the young people that I coach now. I'm like, you guys got to sit down and listen to this.
Because they don't want to.
They don't want to.
So how do you get them to?
I start showing them that as a team, we performed better when we had elders speaking to us. Our elders were able to bring our minds together, and from a performance standpoint, we were stronger. Like the hard evidence that we were stronger was right in front of them. I says, and then when our elders had to go and do something else this following weekend, we didn't have any words. We did really poorly.
Wow.
And with the same personnel. So it was right there, and then all of a sudden the following weekend we had our elders again, and our performance was substantially better. And so I was able to say to my young people, the ones who chaffed, and I was that young person 20 years ago. I'm like, why do I have to listen to this? Give me my paddle, I want to get going.
Yeah.
Whereas now I've got my own children, for example, and I start showing them, we need the words. Maybe you don't, but there's somebody that you paddle with that needs these words. And so you have to stand with them, and you have to show them that you support them. And then they start seeing the value. Grudgingly, they accept it.
Right.
But it's a start. And so when we show our young people that there is a benefit to the words, and then they'll start paying attention. And it's ongoing, because I was there one time. Now my children are there, and the next generation will be chaffing too. And I think this is probably something that's gone on for since forever.
Totally.
Dealing with young people is just a part of our life.
Yeah.
As long as we accept it and address it accordingly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll get through it.
Yeah. And okay, so I want to ask specifics about the elder teachings that usually happen before you actually go out. So how does it work? What is your general? Do you have a similar process each time?
No, they go based on teachable moments. Whatever's going on in amongst the paddlers, they'll talk about that in general. They won't specify, oh yeah, Brandon's got this going, and they'll okay, as a team, they'll generalize it. And everybody kind of knows. So
it's about a life teaching moment.
It's about that specific incident. Well, on this other day, it's about this individual. The following weekend. Is it
always about racing? Or is it about some?
A little bit of racing, coming together. Each time it's different.
Okay.
Our good speakers, they're quite ingenious with getting our minds together.
Right.
And getting us focused on what it is we're doing. That's their objective, is to get our minds going and working through our issues. And because we always have issues. Each person on the team has issues.
For sure.
And acknowledging that each person has a value is a big part of it. And that no one person is more important than the other or less important. Because all of our paddles are the same size, we're all paddling the same water, we're all going in the same direction, and we're all going to get there at the same time. And that's the basis of it. And so getting their minds on the canoe is what they're always trying to do. And then it makes life on the beach easier when they do that.
Yeah.
So I was scolding them for missing that one weekend.
What I love about what you're saying too, I guess, what resonates for me in our world that is about separating us and about individual strengths, which is always wonderful to acknowledge warriors among us that are leading the way. But what is profoundly moving about it is the collective that we're talking about, the community building,
Yes.
that is occurring and how it's good for all of us as a community pulling together.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to say that time is running out already. So we didn't even get to your
No, it's
PowerPoint.
okay.
But we alluded to it.
Yeah,
a little
no, it's
bit,
okay.
And it's great. And I'm wondering if there's any questions from anyone. Adams Lake doesn't look like they're there now. So they started, but they were there. So here's the last question, or you can say final words of inspiration, perhaps. And I feel like we could have talked for at least another hour or two, because I didn't even get into what it's like to get up in the morning and just your day-to-day, canoeing and everything like that. But if you were to inspire other people, or if you were to say anything to people that haven't canoed, like me, the question is, how can canoeing be used by our people to address today's challenges? You could talk about that in general, or you can talk about it really specifically to you. I think you've spoken a lot about it already, but if you wanted to kind of add a bit more.
We try to take advantage of utilizing the experiences that canoers have for their racing, their training, and the ongoing lives in preparation for that. And we use those examples to address any of their issues or barriers that they have outside of canoe paddling. And that everything fits together, and everything is connected directly to each other, and you can't exist without any of those experiences, because then we aren't the people that we are without those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the strength that we are. We're here right now, and we're strong individuals because of those experiences. So we try to make all of those experiences a part of our foundation and something that we stand on, and it makes us stronger as individuals, makes us stronger as teachers for future and coming generations.
Yeah, it gives me hope, actually. Hajka, for what you do. I really appreciate that. Keith was telling me earlier that their community, because it's such a strong canoeing culture, their graduation rates are higher than the rest of the province.
Yeah, I believe it.
Like it really does actually have profound impacts, not only for youth in school, but I imagine other aspects of the quality of life of your community. It does sort of lay the ground, and it's inspiration for a lot of us.
Yeah, in my village, there's only about 25% of us are canoe paddlers, but we do, as a village, we're quite successful in education and employment.
That's really good.
25%, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's
That's
great.
pretty.
That's really
That's 1 in
awesome.
4 people
That's amazing.
kicking
That's
ass on the
amazing.
water.
Yeah,
Paddling at one time or another.
Yeah, no,
their
that's
lives.
great.
yeah, that's phenomenal.
I think, like I've witnessed amazing changes, like overnight changes, like where the colonial education system will treat a youth like as problematic or at risk, as they call it, and then pathologize how they treat them with this institutionalized,
Language.
yeah, and then they get put into this category, and then having been one of those youth at
Right.
one time,
Right.
and knowing what I needed, and that the best medicine that I got was from my own community and my own culture, and then witnessing other youth who are struggling, and then seeing them like sitting at the back of the canoe, not wanting to engage with anybody, having a really bad attitude, like not wanting to do anything, to within days they're the ones cleaning up the canoe at the end of the day to make sure that it's clean. They're making sure that their cohorts are fed and watered, and they're speaking really loud and proud, and and then seeing them years later and they're skipping a canoe, But not only that, they've got a job, they've like done amazing things in their lives, and to see that change is like, to me, I just think, okay, that's amazing. I just think, okay, that is really cool. That is like, that's one place where we need to put our energy. And the other thing too is when I see elders, like ones who come on the canoe, been through residential school, have been through the ringer, and when they sit in our circles and they tell us their story, and you're just like, how did you live through that? Like, how did you survive that? And then they tell you, they give you something. They give you something that got them through that experience, and that's what's getting them through this. And they're sharing that, they're gifting that to everybody that's in the circle. And I just think, holy crap! I'm just like, that's like. So I've witnessed miracles. Literally witnessed miracles, like people who overcome the most arduous of obstacles and are still there fighting, and their spirits are awake, and it's done. That's what it does for me too. And I just think, you know, why would we not want to promote that or make that part of our lives? And so again, I don't know what else to add to that. That's where it takes me. Right? Yeah. That's good.
I thank you both for what you do. It's been a gift to have you here. It's really beautiful, and I hope I can canoe with you someday.
Yeah.
I really do. That would be phenomenal, and I really hope that all of you have an opportunity to canoe. And what you give back to our communities is really important, and just your words and your being is phenomenal. So I really appreciate that. Can I ask if you would close with a song again for us?
I only know one song. No, I'm just kidding. I have to really think about that.
Think about that song.
I could do one.
Could you? I would be honored if you
Awesome.
could play my
That's
drum.
a beautiful drum.
Thank you.
too.
I painted it.
It's, well, of course.
We don't have to
We
stand.
don't have to stand? Okay.
Whenever I do a song, I do a little bit of history of the song. My Uncle Stephen taught me it's a paddling song, and he was taught this by his uncles from Musqueam. It's a paddling song. Oh ho, oh ho, hey ho, hey ho, oh ho, hey, oh ho, hey ho, hey ho,
Nice job. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful drum,
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Adams Lake. And thank you, all you participants on the webinar. We really appreciate you joining, and we have some thank yous from everyone. And, yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
We're done?
We're done. We're done.
Great. Well, thank you.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
That wasn't so painful.